The Rams are linked to a Pro Bowl running back, but I'm going to tell you why they shouldn't sign him. Is Cam Akers the future at RB1? And what's the Rams' best throwback of all time? That's coming up on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley? Welcome to another edition of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your two-time Super Bowl champion LA Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcast. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you want to watch the video version of the show, head over there, join the party, hit that subscribe button, and let us know, do you think the Rams should pursue Dalvin Cook? My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, SI Lakers, Dodgers Nation. One time a Dodgers reliever nicknamed me Talking Guy inside the Dodgers clubhouse. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-, half, and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio network, ESPN 710 LA. He was just named the People's Champion. He won that award. He's the Stan Kroenke to my Sean McVay, Mr. Travis Rogers. Trav, you ready to rock?
I am. Stan Kroenke, another trophy in his case. He's got a Stanley Cup, a Lombardi trophy. Now he's got a Larry O'Brien. My man is winning stuff.
Yeah, I had to find some way to get Stan Kroenke into this show because that guy just straight up wins titles. Another example. I know Laker fans weren't happy about it, but still, hey, man, you got to feel good for our guy.
Unbelievable. So can you tell me who called you Talking Guy in the Dodger clubhouse? Again, is that a state secret?
No, I can tell. It was actually Bruce Dark Gratterall. So, yeah, Bruce Dark Gratterall called me Talking Guy. And then little did I know that the rest of the clubhouse just called me Talking Guy from then on. So, hey, it's fine. It works. I'll take it.
That's great. Well, you tell him to stop thinking he's Omar Vizquel and throwing the ball in the right field.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely let him know. He's kind of a big deal, a little intimidating, but I'll drop that. But, yeah, T-Rod, let's get into this because, of course, you know, there's a high-profile free agent, a big name, and, of course, they're going to be linked to the Los Angeles Rams. That's what happens. And after 6 seasons in Minnesota, the Vikings have decided to move off star running back Dalvin Cook. Now, Travis, it's not for lack of production, okay? He's a 4-time Pro Bowler. He's topped 1,100 yards, 4 straight seasons, but It's about the money. The Vikings are saving at least $9 million in 2023 after they released Cook Friday after just 2 years into his 5-year contract. Now, interestingly enough, the Rams have been mentioned. Rich Eisen, Peter Schrager, there have been people, they've been linking Dalvin Cook to the Rams. To me, I don't love the idea. I like where the Rams are heading. I don't think you need to add another cook in the kitchen at this point.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that the catch, though, is always the price, right? If you can get a good player at a discounted rate, I think it's something that you should look into. I am going to be a broken record on this. I'm going to say this over and over and over again. Do they want to win? Do they want to add talent? Do they want to put themselves in a position? Because, look, Dalvin Cook is a really good football player, like you just mentioned. This is not a he can't play kind of thing. This is he's an expensive player kind of thing. And whether or not you want to do that if you're Minnesota, whether or not you want to do that if the Rams have been very strategic, I guess is one word for it, on how they've been adding talent this season. I don't know exactly what their goals are heading into the season. I know what they've been telling me, but what they've been telling me and what they've been showing me are not the same thing. I think this falls into that category.
Yeah, exactly. This would run contrary to what we've seen. It'd be antithetical to really what their plan has been. It just doesn't fit. And we know their eyes are on 2024 and beyond. Of course, they traded Allen Robinson, and now they have the second most dead cap in the league at $74.2 million. Yep. And according to Over the Cap, the Rams have $1.5 million in cap space. So that's bottom 5 in the NFL. I agree. If you could get him on a discount, if you could get him on the cheap, it does make sense. He is a talent, but still, does he really make sense for what they're trying to do? I think the answer is no. I'd rather spend some money on an edge rusher or a cornerback because do you really need a running back at this point, especially when you have Cam Akers?
Well, I think that's it right there, right? The Cam Akers portion of this is incredibly meaningful. And it's tricky, Doug, because of what we got out of Cam Akers last year. I don't know which version of that guy you're going to get. Are you going to get the guy that was really good at the end of the year, a guy that went over 100 yards a few times and looked like a high-level NFL running back, the guy that, that the Rams leaned on their playoff run a couple of years ago, a guy that could be a difference maker? Or are you going to get the guy that was there at the beginning of the season who was not good at all, a guy that they basically said, get out of here, we don't want you anymore, and the rest of the league said, yeah, we're not that interested either? I don't know what they're going to get. I don't know what their plan is for him. They've been very, very reluctant to dip their toe into that, let's just call it the free agency pool. I know he's not a free agent, but they just really have not been active there this year. And I never say never, because he is a good player, and maybe they decide to zag a little bit coming up here right before the season. But so far, they've been really, really cautious about adding not just payroll, but quite frankly, and there's really no other way to say it, talent. They just haven't added a lot of talent this offseason, and Dalvin Cook's a talented player. Yeah, no, exactly. It's like you get rid of Jalen Ramsey, you get rid of a lot of these guys that put you Bobby in a position Wagner that says, hey, right? We're going to be cost conscious. It's Ramsey, it's Wagner, it's Robinson. And I know Robinson didn't play well for him, but he's a talented guy. You've seen much more talent leave than come in. Yeah, I think, too, you look at the talent that it's really been a departure from what we've seen from this Rams team. We know they're not afraid to go out there and get guys, especially brand name guys, especially guys that have had a lot of success in this league. And one way to look at it, too, is you could say, hey, maybe with a healthy offensive line, you still have Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp. That would be kind of the way you would sell the idea of a Dalvin Cook. But I also think, too, we're going to talk about it here in our next segment about the future of Cam Akers. I think they also want to give a runway to Cam Akers just to see what he has, to see if he can be a guy in the future. It almost reminds me of, hey, if you go to your mom, say, hey, Mom, can we have Dalvin Cook? And your mom says, no, we have Dalvin Cook at home. And the Dalvin Cook at home is Cam Akers, right? Another Florida State running back. I hated that answer. That was always so disappointing. Yeah, I know you have it at home, but it's always better to get it from somewhere else. And look, the rub here is, what does it cost? Because look, I think the one thing in this league that you're almost always pretty certain that you can find is a running back that's good enough. I'll go back a few years, right? When the Rams were getting ready to go on their Super Bowl run, they used C.J. Anderson, who had been out of the league for a while. They brought him in, and not only was he serviceable, he was really good. He played incredibly well for the Rams. That playoff game against the Dallas Cowboys at the Coliseum, where 80,000 people there, 60,000 of them Dallas Cowboy fans, it felt like. And C.J. Anderson just ran over everybody. He was an unbelievable little, problem to solve when Todd Gurley was down. You can find a guy. I think that the Rams may have learned a valuable lesson when it came with Todd Gurley. Don't pay these guys a ton. There's always somebody else that you can find that's the meal at home, like you put it, Doug. And I think they've got it right now, and I don't think that they're going to pay a high price for it. Yeah, that's another great point, Travis. Just the fact that we're in an era where you can find running backs, and the difference between a great elite running back and a good running back that can get the job done, it's razor thin. In this era, you don't need that big brand name running back. You need an offensive line that can open up holes for a running back, and you can find a way to go out there and make plays. So I don't see this happening. Like I said, I'd rather go out there and get a veteran edge rusher or a cornerback, but this is the Los Angeles Rams. You know that they probably saying to themselves, if it's a possibility, maybe they go out and get them, but yeah, I just don't think with the money they're trying to spend this offseason, the direction they're headed to, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I still think, too, there is a chance that Cam Akers could be that guy for this team. And also, I talk a lot of Vikings fans who, one of my friends who's a good Vikings fan texts me, he's like, you really don't want him because, hey, he's great, and then all of a sudden he fumbles at the 5-yard line in the red zone when you need it the most. Well, so they've got a guy that fumbles at home already, right? Cam, they've got that at home too. When it comes to somebody who puts it on the ground at the worst time, they've got that particular skill is something they have in abundance at the moment. Yeah, fair enough. And speaking of Cam Akers, hey, we're going to talk about him in our next segment because there's a very interesting quirk in his contract that could make him affordable for the Rams beyond next season. That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams. All right, before we do that, D-Mac, let's talk about our fans at FanDuel, right? Make your way to FanDuel right now, because check this out. New customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's right. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets, I should say. Easy for me to say. If your first bet does not win, here's the great part about FanDuel. No matter which day you go, you're going to find some unbelievable promotions that are fun, that's going to catch your eye, that's going to say, you know what, I want to get down on that. So every single day there are great promotions. Of course, FanDuel is safe and secure, so you don't have to worry about anything like that. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Name a better phrase than that. You get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet all of the playoff action. There's Major League Baseball that's getting going right now. The U.S. Open is right around the corner, right here in Los Angeles. So go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's a lot. $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
And we're off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcast. And a special shout out to our everyday listeners. You can be an everyday listener too. It's a club you want to join for sure. Join that everyday listener club here on Locked On Rams. But Trav, here in our second segment, we're going to talk about Cam Akers and talk about his future with this team, because Cam Akers is a guy that has a lot of talent. He's shown some potential. You saw the way he returned last year for the Rams, was able to have success. Yeah. And because he was injured in training camp in 2021, didn't play 6 regular season games that year, his 2024 free agent status is very interesting because it went from a UFA to an RFA. We're going to explain that in a second here, but do you like the idea of him moving forward past this season, Trav?
Price. What's it going to cost? Like we just talked about, right? If you can get him at a number that you're comfortable with, sure. Cam Akers is a good player. Cam Akers kind of does the things that Sean McVay wants out of that position. He can carry the ball. He can make explosive plays. He's a pretty rugged runner when he's healthy, little bit injury prone. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's a pretty good pass blocker. Like all of the things that you would hope to have in a running back, Cam Akers kind of checks most of those boxes. The big questions are, is he going to be available to you to play? Which version of him are you going to get? And the most important part, what does he cost? You know, you talk about restricted free agency right there. What else is somebody going to offer him? If somebody goes in there and throws a number, you're like, well, I'm not going to do that. That's bad for the rest of my roster construction. Then you can walk away from it. It's not a Austin Reeves situation, kind of use another local comparison where the Lakers have to keep Austin Reeves. They can't afford to let him go. Whatever the price is, they got to get in there and make sure it happens. That's not the case with Cam Akers. That is a price conscious decision, and they might get priced out. I don't think they will, because I think that the league made it pretty obvious what they think of Cam Akers when he was available last year. I don't know if there's going to be a stampede to Les Snead's door to try to make an offer there, or to his agent's door, I guess is a better analogy right there. But I'd take him back, but it's got to be at the right price.
Yeah, it's all about the price, and that price could be so affordable for this Rams team that really it would make sense. And I think, like you mentioned, it depends on how he performs this season, how things go, not just on the field, but in the locker room, based on what we saw last season, how engaged he is. But it's very interesting because they could get him at a very affordable price. I mean, yes, a team, like you said, can go out there and make a big offer for him, and that would be tough to match. But still, if you look at the second round tender, they could get him at a $4.3 million deal. And if he has a breakout season in 2023, that's a very favorable contract.
It is. And let's say something nice about him, because I think that this is important. Last year, I think, ended on a very high note for him. It could have been very easy for him to get in his feelings, for him to get it, and this, well, they don't want me, then bleep these guys, and I'm not going to try. And he went home, and he's going to do whatever it is that he could have done that would have not only sabotaged the Rams, but would have sabotaged himself. He didn't. He stayed ready. He came back. He played well. I think that speaks to his character in a very positive way. But the fact that they got there in the first place still exists, right? So I don't know which of those two versions of Cam Akers shows up. Hopefully the light went off for him. Hopefully the light goes off for Sean McVay, that they need him. And like you said, that number right there is not I don't think I can get there. That is a very manageable number for the Rams. And look, running backs, I think I made it pretty clear. I'm not paying those guys. Some guy that I can draft very late, some guy that I can get from another team, some guy that's an undrafted free agent. I can find a running back. He's not a guy like Derrick Henry. He's not a guy like Saquon Barkley, who you just can't replace. he's a guy that I think you can find a reasonable replacement for at the right price.
Yeah, now I love what you said there at the end about not wanting to pay running backs. You're not getting those bell cow running backs for the 90s and early 2000s. It is the easiest position in the NFL to replace at this point. And I think that maybe, you get on a one-year deal with the qualifying offer. Maybe you consider it, but no, absolutely not under any circumstances do I want a big extension. We saw what happened with Todd Gurley,
times, Doug, and I think it's important where you spend your money on quarterbacks, wide receivers, edge rushes, and left tackles. That's where you spend your money, right? Those are the ones that are really hard to find. And when you find a good one, you got to pay him to keep him. Guys that are the quarterback, get the quarterback, protect the quarterback, and help the quarterback. Everything is around those four spots. Everybody else, you can probably make do with an NFL average player.
Exactly. If it's a Todd Gurley, I think they probably learn from that situation, because if it's a Gurley type talent in his prime where you don't have the injury concerns, maybe you do consider it.
Yep.
And if you look at it, Akers has a $1.9 million cap in 2023. He is a very affordable player, but let's not forget, this is a guy that still hasn't eclipsed the 1,000 yard mark in a season. Todd Gurley, 3 years from 2017 to 29, 54 TDs. He had 75 plays of 15 plus yards, 45 plays with 20 plus yards. 3 years since 2020 to 2022, all Rams running backs combined, 38 touchdowns, 57 plays of 15 plus yards, and 22 plays of 20 plus yards. So he is no Todd Gurley by any stretch, at least at this point.
Gurley was one of the best players in the league for a period of time, right up until he wasn't. And I think you said it. I think they learned their lesson that, and again, Gurley was special, like some of those other guys I mentioned, and they paid him big, but it's like milk in that refrigerator. Once it goes bad, it's bad. There's no turning it back, and I think that they learned their lesson.
Aging like guacamole in the sun. By the way, is Georgia the Rams farm system at this point?
It seems like it. They got a few.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But coming up in our last segment, we're talking Rams throwback uniforms. What is the Rams best throwback uni? That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams. And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. And a special shout out to our everyday listeners. You can be an everyday listener too. Join the club. It's good times here talking Rams football. But Travis, here in our final segment, little fun one. We're talking Rams throwback uniform. Saw something online about which is the Rams best throwback uniform. And before we get into this, we're not talking about the current uniforms, because I want to spend a couple segments this summer on those. I have a lot of thoughts on that, but we won't tip those off. But we're going to start with these throwbacks. Now, I got my top 5 list right here. Okay. And the fifth one might be a little controversial. I'm going with the color rush. The color rush, like we saw, the navy in the gold, of course, famous for the Monday Night Football game, the barn burner, the Rams 54-51 win at the Collie. And hey, that was a fantastic game. I like the fact that you got the navy matches the navy. I don't know. What are your thoughts on those color rush ones, Trav?
You said it. I don't love them, but there's a big, big but attached to it, right? The big but is, that's the most fun football game I've ever been to that wasn't USC Texas in the Rose Bowl with Vince Young. It was bonkers that every what was it? Samson Ebukam, I think it was, had 2 touchdowns in that game. It was just, everything about it was that they picked off Patrick Mahomes, I think 3 times, maybe it was 4. It just was a track meet up and down. So I don't love the uniforms, but it is evocative of one of the most fun nights I've ever had watching football. So yeah, I am 100% good with those, and I'm glad they're 5th, because any higher I would have had to strike it from the list.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I'll not go that far. I'm not there on my top spot, but that game was crazy. I mean, the fact that you had that score, you probably see that score in the highlights. You're like, well, were there any defensitive plays? Yeah, Marcus Peters had a pick, like you said. I mean, so many defensive plays. I love too how those two teams, they basically scored all their points basically in that game, and they didn't have a touchdown against the Patriots, right? So very interesting how that stuff works out. I
still think it's the only game in NFL history where the losing team had more than 50 points.
Yeah, no, it was insane. It was a college football game. It was a college football game. Wow. One of the all-time classics, one of the best Monday Night Football games of all time. But moving on to number 4, greatest show on turf, navy with the champagne gold. You had the gold panels. You had the Rams word mark under the neckline. Me, when I really fell in love with that greatest show on turf team, it was on Madden. right? LA didn't have a team at the time. I was a big Madden freak. I still am to this day. I would always play with that greatest show on turf team. I know some Rams fans out there, they don't like the champagne gold because they think it reminds them of the 49ers. But what do you think of when you think of those jerseys, Trav?
I like how you kind of split the difference, D-Mac, because that is probably the best Rams team of all time. I mean, you're talking about Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Orlando Pace. I mean, just an unbelievable team. It reminds me of the St. Louis Rams. And as someone who grew up in Los Angeles, who was a Rams fan as a kid, who was thrilled to see him come back here 8 years ago, I remember when they went to St. Louis. At first, they had the original Rams uniforms, or at least the current like mid '90s Rams uniforms, and then they showed up with that gold color. I'm like, nah, man, the Rams aren't gold. Rams are yellow. That doesn't work for me. So, I'm with you on 5. I can't get with you on 4.
Okay, no, I agree. Like, maybe counterpoint to that, though. Counterpoint to that, and this is what I've always said. I like the fact that you almost think of those as the St. Louis Rams uniforms, and they didn't get to wear our LA Rams colors for the most part. You had it for a few seasons there, but when you think of the Rams, their beautiful Rams yellow represents the sunshine of LA. The blue represents the ocean, the blue skies. I think it more fits LA. That, to me, the darker aesthetic was really a thing at the time. You even saw the 49ers go darker. A lot of teams going darker. That really was the trend around sports. So I get it at the time, but like I said, it's more about the Madden nostalgia, Marshall Faulk, and just kind of switching up. Number 3, this one might be a little bit of a hot take, because I assume this is a lot of Rams number 1. The Eric Dickerson golden blue, super fire. To me, this is perfection. This is a 10 out of 10 uniform for me. I love this uniform, but yeah, I have it at number 3.
I'm curious to hear what 2 and 1 are, because that's number 1 for me. Like, when I think of the Rams, I think of that uniform. And you described it perfectly. That is the Eric Dickerson era. That is the late 80s, early 90s Rams. You know, you could talk about like Jim Everett, Pat Hayden, those Super Bowl teams against the Steelers in 1980, Vince Ferragamo, that connection of colors, and I use this as a compliment. It's not meant derisively at all, but almost those cartoony colors, those very basic primary blue and yellow colors that when I think of the Rams, that's still the first thing that pops into my head.
Yeah, no, they're incredible. These are all go to this point. This is a Mount Rushmore, right? They're all Mount Rushmore ones, but those are perfection. Of course, the Eric Dickerson, the horse collar situation, the goggles. I mean, absolutely elite uniforms in every sense. But number 2, I'm going Fearsome Foursome. Fearsome Foursome, the blue and the white, as the kids would say today, they're icy. Super clean. I love the fact you got the blue and white horns. I just think, they're just such a nice uniform, so clean, and I just really represent the history of this Rams team as well.
Well, that would have been number 2 on my list as well. I would have put your 3 and number 1. I would have left your 2 right where it is. I have in my little home set, I've got 2 Rams helmets. I got the current one right now that they have, and I have the one that you just described with the white horns. It makes me think of Deacon Jones. It makes me think of Merlin Olsen, Lamar Lundy, Rosie Greer, Fearsome Foursome, like you mentioned there. And it's early Rams in LA, right? When they were here in the 60s, when they had those guys together, it's a very specific time in Rams history. And I think the uniforms, and they're clean as a whistle too, right? There's just nothing superfluous about them. It's just blue and white and clean and awesome.
Yeah, and I love how they always look dirty.
Yeah.
Deacon Jones, the Secretary of Defense right there, Deacon Jones, just getting dirty, getting nasty. They wear them as their home uniforms. Only thing they don't have that the other ones have is just a blue stripe. You don't have the Rams horn, and that to me is what really takes it to the next level. And coming in at number 1, 1973 to 1999, the white with the gold pants. I'm going white with the gold pants. 3 of the 4 Rams Super Bowls wore these. Of course, the 2 times they did win the Super Bowl, they're wearing these right in 1999, 2000. Also, you saw a modern throwback version of these in Super Bowl 56. To me, these are just so clean. I love the white. To me, for some reason, the players they look a little faster in that white uniform. To me, these are absolute perfection.
I like it. I love that choice. I think that it's definitely in the top 5. I would take your 3 and 1 and flip it. Everything else I can get with. But look, the Rams have great gear. The color schemes we can argue about, but just the horn logoed helmet is just such an iconic look. And even the modern ones now, I know that we could talk about that another day, really grew on me over the last couple of years. When I first saw them, like, I don't know about this, but that horned helmet, and whether you got blue, whether you got yellow, whether you got white, any of these things, they work for me. I'm a blue guy. I love blue uniforms. So that's always going to be at the top of my list. But your list, I co-sign, Doug. It's very, very good.
No, it's okay. I kind of felt we were going to have a little disagreement on number one. And yeah, shout out to Fred Gurkey. Fred Gurkey changed sports forever. Of course, the Rams running back in 1946. He was the guy who came up with the idea to paint the Rams horns on the helmet. They were the first team to have a logo on their helmet. I love the fact that he was in his garage painting all those for his teammates. I can't imagine Cam Akers in his garage painting on the Rams helmets, or Todd Gurley or any running back doing that. I mean, could you imagine that?
Well, I would. That might be a fun thing to do one day, is figure out who would be the guy that has to take the helmets home and paint them. Like, of the 54-man roster, who's the helmet painting guy? Is it Mr. Irrelevant? Is it somebody that, a rookie that they want to haze? Is it somebody that's got an artistic flair? Like, what are we looking at? The guy, is there a template? Do you have to do it by hand? I got a million questions.
No, exactly. Hey, and you mentioned art. He was an art major. He had an art degree, so he gets it approved by the NFL, changes history. I wish I was there in the Coliseum that day. They basically had like a 10-minute standing ovation when they saw those helmets painted on. But yeah, those are perfection. One last take I want to give you, though, is I want to see a throwback game every single year. I want to see the throwbacks, either the white or the white and blue. I want to see one throwback game every single year for this Rams team.
Okay, I want to see it for the whole league. I mean, the Rams, yes, the Rams are a great throwback candidate because they have some great choices along the way, but you don't want to see the Buccaneers and the creamsicles. You don't want to see, some of those great uniform. I would love to see the Tennessee Titans or the Houston Texans throw on the old Oilers gear. There's just so many good old NFL uniforms that we don't get to see anymore. I'd be all over that. The Broncos with the big D with the horse reared up. Like, I'm in for all of that. I'm here for every last one of those games.
Those are clean, and you can do it this year, too, because you can have the different helmets, and that's going to be a whole separate discussion, too, about the current Rams helmet. But, yeah, the Rams, their uniforms, second to none, best in the game in my eyes. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @DMac_LA. And, of course, as always, Mr. Travis Rogers, the man of the people, the people's champ. You can follow him on Twitter at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.